All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon or this morning, I guess, if you are on the West Coast. We are really excited to have you back here for another monthly webinar with the FibTech. As you know, we try to host these webinars monthly based on our marketing themes for the month. And our monthly theme for August is the chain of survival. And I'm just going to talk through that really quickly. The chain of survival is 6 links that, when done quickly and effectively, they provide the highest possible chances of survival from sudden cardiac arrest. And those are: number 1, activating emergency response; number 2, providing immediate CPR; number 3, rapid defibrillation. And those 3 steps hopefully happen before an ambulance shows up; and then advanced resuscitation, post-cardiac arrest care, and recovery. So today we have a really special guest, Ellie Breech, and she has some really firsthand experience with the chain of survival. So I'm going to give her a little intro, and then, so you can learn kind of some of her background. So she's currently the starting goalie for the University of Pittsburg women's soccer team and an incredible athlete. But again, we're definitely going to talk a little athletics, but we're definitely here to hear her amazing personal story. So thank you so much for joining us, Ellie.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, so before we get into it, let's hear kind of like what's going on with the soccer season. How's it going so far?
It's going so far so good. I have a winning record, and tomorrow morning we'll be on a airplane to California for the first time this season to play Cal State Fullerton and Loyola Marymount. And then later in September, we'll be going back to California to play Stanford and Cal. So this is the first of two.
Nice. That's awesome. Some cool road trips. So I'm just curious, like growing up, were you always like tunnel vision soccer? Or did you play other sports, or what was the process to kind of decide to be like a college soccer player?
I did just about everything. And I think when I was younger, from tree climbing to rugby and gymnastics, built my athletic base super strong. And then when I was about in middle school, I decided I wanted to just stick with the soccer thing. So I left gymnastics and rugby behind. Rugby is also very prevalent in my family. A lot of my family played rugby, which is so good this past summer, seeing it grow in popularity with the
Yeah.
Olympics. And then when I was in eighth grade, when I started playing academy level soccer, is when I decided I'm just going to stick to being a goalie, see where it takes me. And then the next year, when I was in ninth grade, I started receiving offers and interest from college, and I committed to the University of Pittsburgh. And fast forward, I'm here now. So time
That's
flies.
awesome. That's cool. It is interesting you say that because rugby is like a super like fast growing sport in the US. Obviously it's huge in other parts of the world, but I feel like there's a lot more like youth rugby associations, which is great. Okay, so obviously I could sit here and talk to you about sports all day, but we got to talk a little bit about CPR. So I'm just kind of curious. So kind of growing up, and every state's a little different and schools are different, but did you like get any CPR training growing up, or in middle school or high school?
Nothing extremely formal until I was in e 11th grade, and I took a lifeguarding class is where I formally learned CPR. But before that, my dad's an emergency room nurse, so he has told
Mm-hmm.
me the good, the bad, the ugly about CPR. So that's where I feel like I got my awareness and base of it, because
Mm-hmm.
I knew that bad things can happen and you have to do something about it. And then I learned the proper technique and what to do and how to use an AED for the first time when I took a lifeguarding class in high school. Then I became a
Okay.
lifeguard for 2 years, and we had in-service days where we would review the techniques. But I stopped that once I started entering college. I just didn't have time for it anymore. So then my most recent CPR training was after the commotio cordis that Damar Hamlin faced, and he wanted to raise awareness and train all the student athletes at Pitt. So that
Yeah.
was February of 2023.
Okay. Wow, that's amazing. So yeah, so obviously, in Damar's the University of Pittsburgh, he played football there, which is awesome. So his event happened. I'm trying to think of the timing. So his event happened on January 2nd.
Yeah.
And okay, and then you guys did your so yeah, talk a little bit about the event. So he came there in February of 2023 and just kind of hosted the student athletes.
So it wasn't him specifically. He
Yeah,
deployed a team of
yeah,
people from the American Heart Association and UPMC that
yeah.
took time out of their day. Also, some emergency medicine students at the University of Pittsburg to come and at 7:30 in the morning make CPR training a good time and teach all the student athletes.
Okay, that's awesome. And I'm just I want to talk about this. I think it's a really, really powerful thing, obviously, but I'm just kind of curious, like obviously there's probably a little bit of more of an awareness of this, and that's Damar's been such an incredible advocate. And his incident, I think, has brought to light the importance of, quick response. But I guess I'm kind of curious what like people's like attitudes were like, when it came to like, oh, we have the CPR training, like were people excited about it? And kind of like after it ended, like how people felt about going through the training.
I think at first, if I'm being completely transparent, people were a little annoyed that they would have to
Mhm.
come in before
Yeah, in the
training,
morning. Yeah,
especially in the morning when we have 6:30 a.m. practice every single day. It can become a little bit of a drag, but once everybody got there, everybody who was teaching at Dr. O from UPMC Pediatrics at Children, she really made everything a party.
yeah,
And played music, everybody got into it. And I was really, really proud of my teammates because
yeah.
me being a lifeguard, like I already kind of took it seriously.
Hmm.
I remember also being the person that like demonstrated it when they were like, so who knows how to do CPR? And everybody was like, Breech, Breech, which is what they call me. It's my last name. And I went in and I did the demonstration.
Nice. That's cool. And I just think it's so important. There's something to like athletes being, I mean, we want everybody to have this education and awareness, but and this, playing at such a high level of sport that a lot of times you do have, your athletic trainer or some sort of medical professional that's there at practice, at games, around if you're in the weight room, but not necessarily always, right? Like you and your friends might go and like, do some stuff on your own or do some extra training or go, whatever, you're out at a field just messing around. And I just feel like it's really important for like athletes to be empowered to kind of help each other, right? Because there's not always going to be that medical professional around.
Yeah, exactly. And if you see the population of athletes, when you think of athletes, you think of one fit. They can probably
Yeah.
do it for a long time, and they're also just super sharp under pressure. So if I had to choose a random stranger to do CPR on me, I would hope that it's I wouldn't mind if it's an athlete. I think that's a really
Yeah.
good pool of people to choose from.
Yeah, definitely. And there's one more question about that day. So, and there's a reason behind this question, but when they came and gave you that training, was it like, did you all receive a certification card, or was it just kind of like a basic training, like education, or kind of how did they leave it with you? Did they say, did
It
you
was
get a, yeah,
just a basic training education. We didn't leave with a certificate or anything. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of falter. It's like, oh, since I don't have an official certificate, I can't do it, which isn't true, you know?
yeah,
Even if you just know the basics, that's better than doing nothing.
yeah, okay, yeah, I love that point, and I think that's like a point we really need to drive across is like, you know, anything is great, right? CPR certification is great. Doing like a training that you did is great, but I do think it's really important to exactly what you said for people to understand. Certification is great, but even if you don't have a CPR certification, you can still help save somebody's life if you're in the situation. All right, so I want to kind of get into the story that you're going to tell, which is incredible. But before we do that, I just want to kind of talk about your dad's background. I mean, he's an emergency room nurse. Um, was there a known history of a heart issue? Did was there any sort of thing going on before he had his incident?
No, my dad was literally I'm not even kidding. I don't think he would have survived if he at that point was the healthiest he'd ever been my entire life. He
Yeah.
like oddly at that time got into like eating all these superfoods and gut health. Literally 2 days before we went on a 10-mile hike, and we've never done a 10-mile hike together, but we did.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
my dad was in probably the best shape he'd been in since he was a wrestler in high school. but no underlying heart disease, heart conditions, anything like that.
Okay. So all right. So yeah. So Christmas Day. So this is the same. So you have your, this Damar Hamlin event in February of 2023. So Christmas Day 2023, you're home, and you are. I guess I'm thinking of like the soccer schedule. You probably do. You usually get to get home for Christmas, right? With your
Yeah,
schedule, or
I can be home for Christmas. This past year,
yeah,
I wasn't home for Thanksgiving,
yeah,
um, because we were in the NCAA tournament. So I was happy to be home for Christmas.
yeah,
But I was gonna leave like a day or two after before my dad went to the hospital so I could get back to Pittsburgh and have an early start on my training, which
yeah,
is something I've done the 2 years prior. So if it wasn't on Christmas Day, there's a good chance I would not have been home.
yeah, yeah. So yeah. So what happened? So take me through kind of what happened on that day.
Yeah, totally. So my dad's an ER nurse. He worked through the night and up into that
Mhm.
morning. So he came back from work. And once he came back from work, we opened up our presents, such, jolly holiday spirit. Then, like he has for the past 15 years of my life, he slept during the day so he can hop back on his night shift the following night. And he even covered his work a couple extra hours because some of his other coworkers had young children that they wanted to, be there for before they get home, or so they don't have to come to work super early so they could spend that moment with their family. And me and my brother were older, so he even took that step, which I think is really, really, good-hearted of him. But so after we opened presents, he went back downstairs to take a nap, and then my mom heard him make a little bit of a weird snoring noise, which now looking back at it, it was his agonal breaths, which weren't actual breaths. And so my mom went down, tried to yell out his name, and usually he'll be like, "Oh, I'm sleeping. Don't bother me right now." But he didn't say anything. So my mom went down, luckily, and hopped on him. And she thought he was joking, but he was just completely unresponsive. And so that's when she called my name and told me to dial 911. And it's Christmas Day, so I thought it was a joke because I never would have thought in 100 years that my very, good in good shape dad would have his heart stop. It was just super, super unexpected. And so I didn't actually dial 911 until I saw it for myself. So I dialed 911 and then I gave the phone to my mom after I saw the situation that my dad was in. And so I immediately pulled him off his bed, which was, a soft surface, can't do CPR on a soft surface, super ineffective. And then I pulled him onto the ground and immediately started giving him CPR. And I did that for about 9 minutes until the police arrived with an AED. And during that 9 minutes, he also had some aspirations coming out of his mouth. And so scooped some of that out. He also, I didn't know if he was choking. So I did do like a little bit of a finger sweep. I don't think that was super effective. But since I know people always ask me about rescue breaths, I did do a few rescue breaths since I was a lifeguard and I was trained on how to do them. And so a couple times within those 9 minutes, in between cycles of CPR, I plugged his nose, tilted his head back, and I gave him a few rescue breaths. And I saw they were working because his chest expanded, then it
Mhm.
deflated. But at that moment, I just had a feeling that I just had to keep doing CPR.
Yeah.
So kept doing CPR until a police officer came with an AED. The police officer took over CPR and I put on the AED. And after I put on the AED and it was doing all of its calibrations, I continued to scoop aspirations out of my dad's mouth. The AED said no shock advised, which means that my dad was in a PEA. And we didn't know that until later, but a PEA is the most deadly rhythm. It's
Mhm.
a rhythm where it can't even be shocked,
Mhm.
which was a surprise because you see all these medical shows or first responder videos where they
Yeah.
think you shock and then you're magically back to life. And that's
Mhm.
that's not how it works,
Yeah.
especially in my dad's case. So they worked on my dad once EMS arrived. From the moment a police officer arrived and we put the AED on him to the emergency medical people, the EMS services arrived, they were working on my dad for about 40 minutes in the basement where he was put on the Lucas device, and cycles of CPR were continued. Was not able to get a pulse back, or if there was a pulse, it was barely any. I don't remember what it was, but put him on the Lucas device, started on some IVs, and then he went to the hospital where he was previously working a couple hours earlier, where they did their best to stabilize him. When he was actually in the ambulance, they got a pulse back, but he rearrested, and they had to do that all over again. So they got him to the hospital. Some fantastic doctors at UPMC, Dr. Fraley, he got my dad's pulses back as stable as they possibly could with what they had. And then my dad was sent to the ICU. At this point, we didn't know where things were gonna go. It was a shock to everybody. It was a shock to the people working in the hospital because they know my dad. And it was very traumatic to see someone who's the leader of their ER just a couple hours before come in such a vulnerable position. So in the ICU, they decided, Dr. Modolewski, he decided that probably the best option from this point on was to go on ECMO, but the hospital where my dad worked, they do not do ECMO there. So my dad was the first mobile ECMO cannulation, where they put him on heart and lung ECMO and then transferred him to UPMC Harrisburg, where he could continue receiving treatment. So at about 11:30 p.m. is when he finally made it to the ICU in Harrisburg, where they just had continued putting him on ECMO, and it became a waiting game because we didn't know if his heart and lungs were going to be strong enough to recover and do it by themselves. And also my dad was without oxygen for a very, very long time, and we didn't know if he was going to have any kind of anoxic brain injury. And luckily he didn't, which is what we found out a couple days after. Every single day we got a little bit more that he was going to be okay. He was going to be okay. And then by when they transferred him out of the ICU and into the recovery ward is when we were really understanding like he's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. First of all, wow. I mean, it's just an incredible story. And I read a bunch of the articles that were written about it. And I know one of the things that you noted was like it was probably the only time you were thankful for all the conditioning that you had to do for soccer training, because 9 minutes of CPR is very challenging. But yeah, okay. So I guess some of the questions I have, and I think we always think about like the person that's going through this and how horrible it is, but now you're there with your family, and this few days of like a waiting game, it has to be like mental torture. I don't know if you could just kind of talk through like what that was like and how you guys were able to get through it, because I can't imagine and that
yeah,
like in between. Yeah.
yeah, luckily all the doctors and nurses and the entire staff in the ICU, they were super supportive,
Hmm.
and we knew my dad was in the best possible hands.
Hmm.
But also for me personally, I'm when I'm in goal and they score on me, I feel like I can never dwell on it too much because
Hmm.
I put in so much training. I've done all this work. I can't really control the outcome. I did everything I possibly could have. And when my dad was in the ICU and we didn't know how things were going to go, I was able to take a lot of comfort in knowing that I did everything I possibly could, you know. I
Hmm.
gave him CPR, I put on the AED, I called 911. So knowing I did everything I possibly could, and now it was just up to, my dad, if he
Hmm.
had it in him to get better, and just kind of the luck of the draw to see if he
Hmm.
was going to be able to pull through. Because statistically, with how long he was without oxygen and how long he was pulseless, he really technically like should not have made it through. But knowing that I did everything I could with starting with calling 911 and beginning manual CPR gave me a lot of comfort.
Yeah. I think that kind of leads into exactly what, I think, people go through, again, all different types of CPR education, whether it's certification or training. Sometimes it's mandated by work, sometimes it's mandated by a school. And I think it's kind of one of those things sometimes where people are like, oh, I just got to kind of get through this. And it's another, I got to do this again. But, I think the biggest message is like, you never know who you're going to need this for. And I think there's something that's really important about feeling empowered to help save someone you love, or someone that you're really close with. And I don't know if you can talk through that feeling, but like obviously it's the worst moment of your life, and or whatever. But you felt empowered to help, and if you just talk through like the importance of that feeling of like feeling like, okay, I can. It's an emergency situation, but I'm prepared and I can step up and help here.
Yeah, I've always been the person who can't sit around and do nothing,
Hmm.
especially when I see something bad happening. I'm always the person to raise my voice about it or interject and say maybe my 2 cents. And
Hmm.
same thing with like soccer. I always want to do something about it. If something's not going my way, if something's not going well for my team, I want to step up and see what
Hmm.
I can do. And this was just another one of those things I had in my toolbox. So my mom was very panicky. I don't think, was in the place to, do CPR and couldn't really pull out the proper ways because I remember, CPR is tiring, so you switch on and off, and I had her do a round, but that didn't last long till I was like, Mom, let me
Yeah.
let me get back on. Um, but I feel I feel that when it's somebody you love and care about, it can make those situations even more distressing.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it takes a special kind of mindset and a special kind of person to put those feelings aside and just do what has to be done.
Hmm.
I think is something we can all learn from. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of people when doing CPR think they're going to be hurting their loved ones. No broken ribs or no chest pain is going to be greater than losing a loved one or them dying. So
Hmm.
it's really important that people feel empowered to have the courage and just be able to step up and do CPR even if they're nervous or hesitant because they have it in them.
Hmm.
It takes a lot of guts sometimes.
Definitely. You're like a incredible like spokesperson and advocate for this. I mean, I know you said like I feel like you said some people have asked you questions like, do you talk about it at all with people? Like, or are people like asking you like, getting your thoughts, or is it made kind of other people, your friends, your teammates, or people at Pittsburgh just help them like understand why this is really important?
Yeah, so after this happened with my dad, I didn't talk about it and I didn't tell anybody. Nobody on my team, except a few of my close friends. I'd say about in total, four of my friends knew what I was going through and
Hmm.
what I had gone through over Christmas break, but my coaches didn't know. And then one day I was at a student athlete advisory committee meeting, and one of my team administrators was there, and she was like, "So how was your Christmas break?" And I just cracked. I was like, "I'll be honest with you, it was rough."
Yeah.
I spent it in the
Uh,
ICU next to my dad, and I told her what I had gone through. And she was the first one that kind of empowered me to start talking about it. And the more I talked about it, the more I realized how many other people have gone through similar things, whether it be heart attacks, sudden cardiac arrest. It's a big thing going on within athletics right now. Just people don't know why, but there's been an increase of student athletes and youth athletes just
mhm.
dropping at practice. And
Hmm.
same with commotio cordis too.
Hmm.
Um, that one of my good friends, one of his teammates at Swarthmore College recently experienced that this past spring. And so when I met Damar Hamlin, I gave him something to sign to give to him. But
Yeah.
I think it's a lot more common than people were to think. And unless you talk about it, you'd never know. So that's why I think
Yeah.
it's important to speak and talk about it. So with a really good support system here at Pitt, I've been able to do that. I'm open about it with my teammates, and also
Mhm.
my teammates and I, we went to Homestead, which is a little town right near Pittsburgh. It's in the city of Pittsburgh, but it's
Mhm.
also a more underserved community. And we were able to teach them CPR and some pillars of
Oh,
healthy living, which was an
yeah.
awesome experience. So hopefully I get to do that again once the season winds down.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, I mean, just listening to you speak about it, and obviously with your firsthand experience, I mean, I can't think of like a better person to like do that, to go talk through it with people and inspire people and help them. I think part of like teaching is being able to connect to people and help them understand the importance, which obviously you can do better than anybody. So do you remember like the first couple conversations you had with your dad? Like I just can't imagine. It's like he spends his whole life doing CPR and saving people's lives, and now he has CPR done on him to save his life by his daughter. Do you remember kind of that first like conversation of once you knew he was okay, you're able to talk to him in the hospital?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna get a little bit emotional about this, but like
Yeah.
it's something I'll
Yeah.
never is I got a few nods from him when he was still intubated, but he was slowly coming off the sedation. But the day they took the tube out of his throat and he mustered up enough strength to say those few words, he said, "Thank you for saving my life."
Oh my
And
gosh.
that, like,
Yeah.
I think my dad knew what happened because my aunt was there. And even though he was under so much sedation, somebody was there with him at all times until visiting hours closed. And we talked through what happened to him. And we were like, we don't know if you can hear us or not, but you're going to be okay. You had a cardiac arrest. Your daughter did CPR. You did nothing wrong. And so, for like that to be the first thing he said, I thought I wasn't even going to get words out of him for another couple of days after they took the tube out. And that was the first thing he said. Like that changed my life. Like
Yeah.
that really just changed the trajectory of what I want to do with my life, and
Yeah.
puts everything into a really different perspective for me
Yeah.
at least.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. And how's he doing? Like, how's he doing? It's been not quite a year. How's
Yeah.
he doing now? Yeah.
He's doing as good as you can possibly be health wise.
Yeah.
He's back to doing all the things he loves.
That's so great.
He's playing pickleball, he's hiking, he's working again. And
Wow.
then when he was first in like his little medically induced coma, that night after he got to the ICU, the only thing that was open to eat, because it was Christmas Day, was Sheets. So I went to Sheets, got something to eat, and
Yeah.
they had this little pillow pet and it was shaped like a pug. And so that kind of became his mascot through the entire thing. Like
Oh.
I would take his hands like out of his little mitts and pet it and be like, Dad, if you pull through, we'll get a puppy. So we got a puppy in
Oh.
March,
What
and
kind?
it's a little pug puppy named
Oh.
George,
Oh.
and he
Oh.
has
Yeah. Yeah.
been
Yeah.
just like the most healing thing and sweetest thing for our family. So
Oh, that's so cute.
that's what we've been up to. Is my dad's now a pug parent again, because
Yeah.
the year before our last rescue pug had passed. So just super,
Okay.
super refreshing, and changes my entire family's dynamic and attitude on life, and how grateful we are, not just for my dad surviving, but how we came together through, my brother, moving away. I don't live at home anymore. And we're able to, come together, it was really special.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys sound like it's just like an amazing family. It's a strong family to go through all of this. I know I shared with you quickly. But I have had my share of, I had a cardiac arrest when I was younger, but when I was 20, in my 20s, I had open heart surgery and it landed the night before Thanksgiving. So my family and friends now, after I'm okay and everything, love to give me a hard time about how I ruined Thanksgiving. So, has that come up yet, or has you gotten a hard time
Oh
for
my
just like
gosh.
messing
Well,
up Christmas Day last year?
yeah. Well, we're happy he didn't die because if he died, he really would have ruined Christmas.
Yeah, yeah. Christmas Day this year is going to be incredible. Like it's going to be probably the best Christmas ever. But
Yeah, exactly. Considering where we were last Christmas, every
yeah,
day is basically Christmas. So
yeah, that's
that's
so
what
cool.
actually Christmas feels like.
That's so cool. Yeah, but as someone who gets a hard time for that, someone has to give him a hard time about that.
Oh,
So,
of course.
all right. So, last couple thoughts here, and then obviously, if you have anything else you want to say, but I just want to kind of wrap up with like, you know, um, thoughts on, and your whole story explain this, but thoughts you have on that you can give people about, the importance of learning CPR. And I think this is important because like a lot of people that listen and watch these are advocates and there are people that are out there, training and raising awareness and, any messages I think that those people can provide to help again, like we were saying, sometimes people don't take it as seriously as they need to. So, any thoughts you have on that and like how can we really like nail home this point of like how important this is?
I think a 30-minute training, like
Yeah.
we were talking about earlier, CPR certification isn't necessary for administering
Hmm.
CPR. So that 30-minute training, heck, it could even be 20 minutes of training.
Hmm.
Um, Again, not even rescue breaths or anything, just learning how to do proper manual CPR takes about 20 to 30 minutes. And that 20-30 minutes may seem annoying in the moment, but that will save somebody's life. And there's
Hmm.
no predictors on who's gonna collapse, who's gonna go into cardiac arrest, who could possibly have a heart attack that leads into a cardiac arrest. We don't know. There's no adequate predictors of when that's going to happen. So every single person has to do their part and be ready. Another thing I'd say is don't be afraid to have the courage and step up and do CPR. A lot of people think they're going to hurt their family member. They're think if they do it slightly improperly, they should just not be doing it at all. When that's usually never the case. You can't really hurt somebody doing CPR. And if someone you don't know collapses and you start doing CPR, there's something that protects you called the Good Samaritan law. So
Hmm.
you're not going to get in trouble for administering improper CPR. And administering maybe slightly less effective CPR is better than standing around and doing nothing at all. Another thing that I like to touch on sometimes is women are more likely to not receive proper CPR because of their breasts, and people feel uncomfortable to, either lift up their shirt or touch that area in between the sternum. Again, like the Good Samaritan law protects you. So you're not going to get in trouble from touching a woman's chest or exposing their chest in order to put on an AED. That like few moments that may seem, questionable or not necessary or undignifying is a lot more, how do I put this? It's much better to do that for a few minutes than causing someone to lose their life because you don't necessarily feel comfortable touching that area.
Yeah. It's such an important point and it's a huge thing. And I know us as like an AED manufacturer, we try to talk about this and blog about it and because it's a fact, women are less likely to receive CPR than men are. And we need to figure out how we can do a better job of making people feel comfortable doing CPR on women. And I know they are starting to come out with, mannequins that do have breasts to kind of make it more normal. But we have a ways to go. So I appreciate you bringing up that point because it's so important.
Yeah.
Um, cool. So yeah, you're hired as a spokesperson. I don't know. No, I really don't have anything else. I just want to say, like, I'm blown away by the story. I mean, I read about it obviously prior to us doing this, so I could, prepare for my job. But hearing you tell it and hearing about your family and how you all were able to get through this and hear that your dad's doing great. It's inspiring. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And honestly, I was inspired hearing your story because, outwardly you're a very healthy guy, basketball
Yeah,
coach. And like,
yeah,
who would have thought that something could happen to such a healthy appearing person, There's no perfect predictor of what's going to happen in the future. So thank you so much for sharing your story with me. I really appreciate it.
yeah. And thank you for your time. Good luck with the rest of your season. Now you got me. I'm a
Thank you.
Pittsburgh soccer fan, women's soccer fan, so I'm gonna be following you guys. And we just appreciate you taking your time. So thank you, and thank you for everybody for joining, and have a great day.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.